In the small town of Willow Creek, life moved at a slow pace. People knew each other by name, and most days passed without much excitement. For Emma Carter, however, life wasn't always easy. At just 17 years old, she worked part-time at the local McDonald's to save money for college. It wasn't glamorous work, but it gave her a sense of purpose. She liked serving customers, chatting with coworkers, and earning her own paycheck. Despite her cheerful attitude, there was one thing that made her job difficult: a group of bullies who came into the restaurant almost every day. The leader of the group was Jake Miller, a senior at Willow Creek High School. He was tall, with spiky blonde hair and an air of arrogance that made him stand out. Jake thought he was better than everyone else, and he loved showing off his confidence, or what some people called cockiness. His two best friends, Kyle and Ryan, followed him around like shadows. Together they formed a trio that no one wanted to cross. They were loud, obnoxious, and always looking for ways to entertain themselves, even if it meant being cruel to others. Emma had been their target for weeks now. Every time she saw them walk through the doors of McDonald's, her stomach would sink. They would sit at the same table near the window, order large meals, and then start making fun of her. Sometimes they mocked the way she wore her uniform, saying things like, "Hey, do you get paid extra to look so bad?" Other times they teased her about working such a low-paying job. "You're never going to get anywhere flipping burgers," Jake once said, laughing as he took another bite of his cheeseburger. But it wasn't just words that hurt. One afternoon, while Emma was cleaning tables, Kyle snatched her name tag off her chest and held it above his head, taunting her. "Come on, Emma, jump for it," he shouted, laughing as she tried unsuccessfully to grab it back. When she finally managed to retrieve it, her face was red with embarrassment. Customers nearby pretended not to notice, avoiding eye contact and focusing on their fries or drinks instead. Despite all this, Emma tried to stay positive. She reminded herself that these boys were just insecure teenagers trying to act tough. Deep down, she believed they weren't really bad people. They were just misguided. Still, it was hard not to feel defeated when they singled her out day after day. Some nights, after her shift ended, she would cry quietly in her car before driving home. She didn't tell anyone about the bullying, not her parents, not her friends, and definitely not her coworkers. She didn't want to seem weak or draw more attention to herself. One evening, as the sun began to set, Emma found herself alone in the restaurant. Most of the staff had already left, leaving her to close up shop. She wiped down tables, swept the floors, and restocked the condiment station. Everything seemed calm until she heard the familiar sound of laughter coming from the entrance. Her heart sank as she turned to see Jake, Kyle, and Ryan walking in. "Look who's still here," Jake said with a smirk. "Hard at work, huh, Emma?" She forced a smile and nodded. "Can I help you guys with anything?" Jake ignored her question and walked up to the counter. "Yeah, we want free food. You owe us for putting up with your terrible service all week." Emma shook her head politely. "I'm sorry, but I can't give away free food. That's against the rules." Kyle stepped forward, crossing his arms. "Oh, come on. Don't be like that. We're paying customers, right? Or are you too lazy to take our order?" "I'm not lazy," Emma replied firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. "If you want something, you'll have to pay for it." Ryan chuckled. "Wow, someone's got an attitude tonight." Jake leaned closer, his face inches from hers. "Listen, sweetheart, you don't want to mess with us. Just give us what we want and maybe we'll leave you alone." Emma took a step back, feeling trapped. She glanced around the empty restaurant, hoping someone, anyone, would walk in and interrupt the situation. But the parking lot outside was deserted, and the only sounds were the hum of the soda machine and the distant buzz of traffic. Before she could respond, Jake reached out and shoved her lightly against the counter. It wasn't hard enough to hurt, but it startled her, causing her to drop her phone onto the floor. The screen cracked instantly, and Emma felt tears welling up in her eyes. She bent down to pick it up, but Jake grabbed it first. "Oops," he said, holding it out of reach. "Looks like you need a new phone. Maybe if you stop wasting your time here, you could afford one." Kyle and Ryan burst into laughter, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Emma clenched her fists, trying to keep her composure. She hated feeling powerless, but she didn't know what else to do. Fighting back would only make things worse, and calling. The police seemed extreme for what was technically just verbal harassment. Finally, Jake tossed the broken phone onto the counter. Here. Consider it a lesson. Don't mess with us again, okay? With that, the three of them turned and walked out, leaving Emma standing there in stunned silence. Once they were gone, she let out a shaky breath and sank onto a nearby chair. She stared at the cracked screen of her phone, feeling a mix. After the incident at McDonald's, Emma felt drained and defeated. She cleaned up the mess Jake and his friends had left behind, spilled drinks, scattered napkins, and crumbs all over the floor, and locked up the restaurant. Her hands shook as she turned off the lights and stepped outside into the cool evening air. The parking lot was empty now, and the only sound was the distant hum of crickets. Clutching her broken phone tightly, she climbed into her car and drove home. When she arrived, her grandmother, Patricia, was waiting in the living room. Patricia was a gentle woman in her late 60s, with short gray hair and a warm smile that could light up any room. She greeted Emma with a hug, asking how her shift went. At first, Emma tried to brush it off, saying everything was fine. But when she sat down on the couch and saw the concern in her grandmother's eyes, the dam broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she recounted the entire story, the mocking, the shoving, the cracked phone, and the humiliation. Patricia listened quietly, her expression calm but serious. When Emma finished speaking, she placed a comforting hand on her granddaughter's shoulder. "Oh, sweetheart," she said softly. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that." Emma wiped her tears and looked down at her lap. "I don't know what to do, Grandma. I feel so powerless. Like no matter what I say or do, they'll just keep coming back." Patricia nodded thoughtfully. "You're not powerless, Emma. You've always had more strength than you realize. And besides..." She paused, glancing toward the wall where a framed photo of Chuck Norris hung. It was an old picture taken years ago during one of his famous karate tournaments. "You're forgetting something very important." Emma followed her gaze and sighed. "Grandma, please, I don't want to involve Grandpa. He's retired and he doesn't need to deal with this stuff anymore." Patricia chuckled softly. "Your grandfather may be retired, but that doesn't mean he's forgotten how to handle troublemakers. In fact, I think he'd want to know about this." Emma hesitated. She loved her grandfather dearly, but she didn't want to bother him with her problems. Chuck Norris was a legend, a man known worldwide for his martial arts skills, his movies, and his larger-than-life persona. To Emma, though, he was simply Grandpa, the man who taught her how to ride a bike, helped her with homework, and told silly jokes that always made her laugh. He lived a quiet life these days, far away from the spotlight, and Emma preferred it that way. "Grandma, it's not a big deal," Emma insisted. "I can handle it. What if people find out who he is? Things will get messy." Patricia smiled, knowingly. "Sometimes standing up for yourself means letting others help you. Your grandpa taught you self-defense for a reason, didn't he? Maybe it's time to remind those boys that bullying has consequences." Emma bit her lip, thinking it over. Part of her still wanted to avoid involving her grandfather, but another part of her knew her grandmother was right. She couldn't keep letting Jake and his friends walk all over her. Taking a deep breath, she finally nodded. "Okay, I'll call him tomorrow." The next morning, Emma picked up the phone and dialed her grandfather's number. She hadn't seen him in months, and hearing his deep, calm voice on the other end of the line brought an instant wave of comfort. After exchanging pleasantries, she explained what had happened at McDonald's. She described the bullying, the broken phone, and how helpless she had felt. To her surprise, her grandfather didn't raise his voice or sound angry. Instead, he listened patiently, asking questions and offering words of encouragement. "I'm proud of you for handling it the way you did," he said. "But sometimes, actions speak louder than words. Don't worry. I'll come to Willow Creek soon. We'll figure this out together." Relief washed over Emma as she hung up the phone. Knowing her grandfather was coming gave her a sense of security she hadn't felt in weeks. Over the next few days, she focused on work and school, trying to put the incident out of her mind. Still, she couldn't shake the nervous anticipation building inside her. What would her grandfather do when he arrived? Would he confront Jake and his friends directly, or would he have a different plan altogether? On the day of his arrival, Emma drove to the bus station to pick him up. As she waited by the curb, she spotted him stepping off the bus. Dressed casually in jeans, a plaid shirt, and a cowboy hat, he looked every bit the humble Texan rancher. His presence commanded respect even in such ordinary attire. When he saw Emma, his face lit up with a wide grin and he pulled her into a bear hug. "It's good to see you, kiddo," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "Let's grab some lunch and talk about everything." They headed to a nearby diner, where Emma filled him in on the details of the bullying incident. She showed him the cracked phone and recounted each interaction with Jake and his friends. Chuck listened carefully, nodding occasionally, but never interrupting. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and stroked his beard thoughtfully. "You've handled yourself well," he said. "But you're right. It's time to teach these boys a lesson, not through anger or violence, but through understanding. They need to learn that respect is earned, not demanded." Emma raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Chuck smiled faintly. "Leave it to me. I have an idea." Over the next few hours, Chuck shared his plan with Emma. It was simple but effective, focusing on demonstrating the importance of kindness and humility, rather than resorting to intimidation. By the time they left the diner, Emma felt a renewed sense of hope. For the first time in weeks, she believed things might actually change, for the better. As they drove back to her house, Emma glanced at her grandfather sitting beside her. Despite his legendary status, he remained humble and grounded, always putting others before himself. She realized then that his true strength wasn't in his physical abilities or fame. It was in his ability to inspire others to be their best selves. With Chuck Norris in town, Willow Creek was about to experience a lesson it wouldn't soon forget. The next morning, Emma woke up early, feeling both excited and anxious. Her grandfather's arrival had given her hope, but she couldn't shake the nervous energy buzzing inside her. What would happen when he met Jake and his friends? Would they even take him seriously? She pushed those thoughts aside as she got ready for work, choosing to focus on the day ahead. Chuck Norris was already waiting for her in the kitchen when she came downstairs. He greeted her with a warm smile and handed her a cup of coffee. "Ready to face the world today, kiddo?" he asked, his voice steady and reassuring. Emma nodded, though her hands trembled slightly as she sipped her coffee. "I think so. Are you sure this is going to work?" "It'll work," Chuck replied confidently. "Trust me." After breakfast, they drove to the McDonald's together. As they pulled into the parking lot, Emma noticed Jake's car parked near the entrance. Her stomach tightened at the sight, but she forced herself to breathe deeply and stay calm. Chuck placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Let's go," he said simply. Inside the restaurant, it was busy as usual. Customers lined up at the counter, chatting and laughing while employees rushed around filling orders. Emma clocked in and started her shift, keeping one eye on the door. Sure enough, within minutes, Jake and his friends strolled in, loud and obnoxious as always. They made a beeline for the counter where Emma was taking orders. Well, look who's back," Jake said with a smirk, leaning over the counter. "Miss Cracked Phone." His friends snickered, and Emma felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. But before she could respond, Chuck stepped forward, standing beside her. His presence immediately commanded attention. Though he wasn't particularly tall, there was something about the way he carried himself that made people stop and take notice. "Hi there," Chuck said politely, extending a hand toward Jake. "I'm Chuck, Emma's grandfather. Nice to meet you." Jake hesitated for a moment, clearly caught off guard. Then, trying to maintain his tough guy image, he shook Chuck's hand. But the instant their hands touched, Jake winced. Chuck's grip was firm, not painful but strong enough to make a point. Kyle and Ryan exchanged confused glances, unsure what to make of this older man who seemed completely unfazed by Jake's usual bravado. Nice to meet you too," Jake muttered, pulling his hand back quickly. He glanced at his friends, then back at Chuck. "So, what brings you here?" Chuck smiled faintly, his piercing blue eyes locking onto Jake's. I heard there's been some trouble lately. Thought I'd come see what's going on. Jake shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware that all eyes in the restaurant were on them. Customers slowed their conversations to watch the scene unfold, curious about the unexpected drama. Even the employees behind the counter paused momentarily, intrigued by the stranger standing beside Emma. "There's no trouble," Jake said defensively, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. "We're just hanging out." Chuck nodded, slowly, his expression unreadable. "That's good to hear. But let me ask you something. How would you feel if someone treated your sister or mother the way you've been treating Emma?" Jake opened his mouth to respond, but stopped short, visibly flustered. Kyle and Ryan shuffled awkwardly, avoiding eye contact. For the first time, they seemed to realize how their actions might look to others. We weren't trying to hurt anyone," Jake stammered. "It was just a joke." Chuck raised an eyebrow. "A joke? Do jokes usually involve shoving people and breaking their phones?" The room fell silent. Jake's face turned red and he glanced around nervously, noticing the disapproving stares from nearby customers. Even his own friends looked uneasy, shifting their weight from foot to foot. "Look," Jake said finally, his tone softer now. "We didn't mean anything by it. Honest." Chuck studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I believe you, but actions have consequences and words matter. If you want to prove you're sorry, maybe it's time to show some respect, not just to Emma, but to everyone." Jake swallowed hard, clearly struggling to process the situation. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone like Chuck, who radiated quiet authority. After a long pause, he mumbled, "Okay, we'll try." "That's a start," Chuck said, his tone still calm but firm. "Now why don't we step outside and talk more? There's something I'd like to show you." Without waiting for a response, Chuck turned and headed toward the exit. Emma watched nervously as Jake and his friends hesitated for a moment before reluctantly following him. Once outside, Chuck led them to the parking lot, where he stopped and turned to face them. "Here's the thing," he began, his voice carrying a note of finality. "I'm not here to lecture you or make you feel bad. I'm here to teach you something important. Respect isn't just about saying please and thank you. It's about treating others the way you'd want to be treated. And sometimes, the best way to learn that lesson is through experience." Jake frowned, looking skeptical. "What kind of experience?" Chuck smiled faintly. "A little demonstration. Let's play a game. It's called tag." Kyle and Ryan exchanged confused glances while Jake crossed his arms. "Tag? Seriously?" "Seriously," Chuck replied, his tone light but unwavering. "Here's how it works. You try to tag me and I try to tag you. Simple, right?" The boys hesitated, unsure whether to take him seriously. Finally, Jake shrugged. "Fine, whatever." With that, the game began. At first, Jake lunged forward, attempting to slap Chuck's shoulder. But to his astonishment, Chuck sidestepped effortlessly, moving with surprising speed and agility. Before Jake could recover, Chuck tapped him lightly on the back. "Gotcha," Chuck said with a small grin. Kyle and Ryan tried next, but the result was the same. No matter how fast they moved or how hard they tried, they couldn't lay a finger on Chuck. Meanwhile, he continued to dodge their attempts with ease, delivering gentle taps that left them stumbling and frustrated. After several minutes, the boys were breathless and bewildered. They collapsed onto the pavement, sweat dripping down their faces as they stared up at Chuck in disbelief. "How are you doing that?" Kyle panted, shaking his head. Chuck chuckled softly. "Years of practice. But that's not the point. The point is, true strength isn't about overpowering others. It's about knowing when to use your power and when to show restraint." Jake looked up at him, his arrogance replaced by genuine curiosity. "So, what does this have to do with us?" Chuck knelt down, meeting their gaze directly. "It means that bullying doesn't make you stronger, it makes you weaker. True strength comes from treating others with kindness and respect. Remember that." For a moment, no one spoke. The boys sat in silence, absorbing his words. Then slowly, Jake nodded. "Okay, I get it." Chuck stood up, brushing off his jeans. "Good. Now let's go back inside and start fresh. Apologize to Emma and mean it this time. As they walked back into the restaurant, Emma watched nervously from behind the counter. She couldn't believe what she had just witnessed. Her grandfather hadn't raised his voice or thrown a punch. He had simply shown Jake and his friends the error of their ways through patience and wisdom. When they reached her, Jake cleared his throat awkwardly. "Hey, Emma, I'm sorry. For everything. We were jerks and we shouldn't have treated you like that." Kyle and Ryan echoed his apology, their faces flushed with embarrassment. Emma blinked in surprise, then nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I appreciate it." Chuck smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "See? That wasn't so hard, was it?" In that moment, Emma realized something important. Her grandfather's strength wasn't just physical. It was rooted in compassion, humility, and the ability to inspire change. With his guidance, she knew she could handle whatever challenges lay ahead. After the game of tag in the parking lot, Jake, Kyle, and Ryan sat on the ground catching their breath. They were sweaty, tired, and utterly confused about what had just happened. Chuck Norris stood over them, his arms crossed, watching silently as they processed the experience. The air was still except for the distant hum of traffic and the occasional chirp of crickets. Finally, Jake broke the silence. "So, you're saying we're weak because we bully people?" Chuck shook his head. Gently. "No, I'm not saying you're weak. Everyone has strength inside them. It's how you choose to use it that matters. Bullying someone smaller or quieter doesn't make you stronger. It makes you a coward. Real strength comes from standing up for others, treating them with kindness, and knowing when to apologize." Kyle frowned, looking down at his sneakers. "But everyone does it. It's just part of high school." "That's no excuse," Chuck replied firmly. "Just because something is common doesn't mean it's right. You're leaders among your peers, whether you realize it or not. Your actions influence others. If you act cruelly, others will follow. But if you act with respect, they'll do that too." Ryan spoke up hesitantly, his voice barely above a whisper. What if we don't know how to change? We've been doing this for so long." Chuck knelt down so he was eye level with the boys. His piercing blue eyes softened as he spoke. "Change starts with one decision, one moment where you decide to do better. You can't take back what you've already done, but you can choose to be different moving forward. Start small. Treat people the way you'd want to be treated. Apologize when you're wrong. Stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. That's how you become strong, not by tearing others down, but by building them up." The boys exchanged glances, each of them processing Chuck's words. For the first time, they seemed to understand the weight of their actions. Jake looked especially thoughtful, his usual arrogance replaced by genuine reflection. "Okay," Jake said slowly, his voice steady now. "We messed up. With Emma, and probably with a lot of other people too. What should we do next?" Chuck smiled faintly, standing back up. "Start with an apology, to Emma, and to anyone else you've hurt. Mean it when you say it, and then prove it with your actions. Respect isn't given, it's earned." With that, Chuck gestured for the boys to follow him back into the McDonald's. Emma was still behind the counter, organizing napkins and condiment packets. She glanced up nervously as the group approached, unsure of what to expect. Chuck gave her a reassuring nod before stepping aside, leaving Jake and his friends to face her directly. Jake cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. Emma? Can we talk to you for a second?" Emma hesitated, then nodded cautiously. "Sure. I wanted to say sorry," Jake began, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "For everything. We were jerks to you, shoving you, breaking your phone, making fun of you. None of it was okay, and we shouldn't have done it. We're really sorry." Kyle and Ryan chimed in quickly, echoing Jake's apology. "Yeah, we didn't mean to hurt you," Kyle added. "It was stupid, and we feel bad about it." Ryan nodded earnestly. "We'll try to do better. Promise." Emma stared at them, momentarily speechless. Their words sounded sincere, and she could see the regret in their eyes. After a long pause, she finally managed to speak. "Thank you. I appreciate it. Just don't let it happen again. We won't, Jake promised, his tone serious. And if anyone gives you trouble, let us know. We'll handle it. Emma raised an eyebrow skeptically. You'll handle it? Jake grinned sheepishly. Well, maybe not exactly like that. But yeah, we'll help. No more bullying. Chuck stepped forward, placing a hand on Emma's shoulder. See? Change is possible. All it takes is courage and honesty. Emma smiled faintly, feeling a mix of relief and disbelief. She never imagined Jake and his friends would apologize, let alone mean it. But here they were, standing in front of her, ready to make amends. Over the next few days, word spread quickly through Willow Creek about what had happened. Customers at McDonald's noticed a shift in Jake and his crew. Instead of causing trouble, they started holding doors open for employees, cleaning up after themselves, and even offering to help carry trays during busy shifts. At school, they became quieter and less confrontational, earning curious looks from classmates who were used to their rowdy behavior. For Emma, life at work improved dramatically. Without the constant fear of being mocked or harassed, she found herself enjoying her job again. Her confidence grew, and she began interacting with customers more openly, smiling and chatting without hesitation. Other employees noticed the change in her demeanor and complimented her on her newfound poise. One afternoon, as Emma served lunch to a group of regulars, Jake walked in with Kyle and Ryan. They ordered burgers and fries, then sat at a table near the window. When Emma brought their food, Jake handed her a folded piece of paper along with his payment. "What's this?" Emma asked, frowning slightly. "It's a note," Jake said, shrugging. "Just read it later." Curious, Emma unfolded the paper after they left. Written in messy handwriting was a short message. "Thanks for giving us a chance. We'll keep working on being better." Below it were 3 signatures: Jake, Kyle, and Ryan. Emma smiled to herself, tucking the note into her pocket. She felt a sense of pride, not just in herself for handling the situation, but in Jake and his friends for taking responsibility for their actions. It wasn't perfect, and there was still room for growth, but it was a start. That evening, Emma shared the story with her grandfather. Chuck listened intently, nodding approvingly. "I told you they could change," he said with a smile. "People are capable of amazing things when they're given the opportunity." Emma nodded, feeling grateful for his guidance. "I couldn't have done it without you, Grandpa. Thank you." Chuck chuckled softly. "You did most of the work, kiddo. I just reminded you of your own strength." As the sun set over Willow Creek, Emma reflected on everything that had happened. Life wasn't perfect, but it was getting better. With her grandfather's wisdom and her own determination, she knew she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. And for the first time in a long while, she felt truly hopeful about the future. The days that followed were transformative, not just for Emma, but for Jake and his friends as well. Word spread quickly around Willow Creek about the mysterious older man who had taught some rowdy teens a lesson they wouldn't forget. People whispered about it at the grocery store during soccer games and even in line at McDonald's. No one mentioned Chuck Norris by name, though everyone suspected. But the story took on a life of its own. For Jake, Kyle, and Ryan, the experience marked the beginning of a new chapter. They started showing up at school differently, not louder or more aggressive, but quieter and more thoughtful. Gone were the pranks, the sarcastic comments, and the cruel laughter aimed at others. Instead, they focused on making amends. During lunch breaks, they helped clean up trash in the cafeteria without being asked. In class, they stopped disrupting lessons and actually paid attention. Teachers noticed the change first, raising eyebrows in surprise, while students slowly began to trust that the trio was serious about turning over a new leaf. At McDonald's, their visits became less about causing trouble and more about lending a hand. One Saturday afternoon, when the restaurant was unusually busy, Jake approached Emma shyly. "Hey, need any help?" he offered, gesturing toward the growing pile of trays waiting to be cleared. Emma blinked in surprise. Sure, thanks." Together, Jake and his friends rolled up their sleeves and pitched in, carrying dirty dishes to the kitchen and wiping down tables. Customers watched curiously, whispering among themselves about the unlikely sight of the former bullies working alongside employees. By the end of the shift, Emma thanked them sincerely and Jake grinned sheepishly. "It's the least we can do," he said. "You've been through enough because of us." Over time, the tension between Emma and the boys faded completely. They weren't exactly friends, but there was mutual respect, a foundation Emma never thought possible. She realized that people could change if given the chance, and she felt proud to have played a role in their transformation. Meanwhile, Chuck Norris prepared to leave Willow Creek. His visit had accomplished what he'd hoped, teaching Emma, and indirectly Jake and his crew, an important lesson about strength, humility, and kindness. On his last evening in town, he sat down with Emma in the cozy kitchen of her grandmother's house. The room was warm and inviting, filled with the smell of freshly brewed coffee and homemade cookies. "You've grown so much these past few days," Chuck said, leaning back in his chair. "I'm proud of you." Emma smiled, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I couldn't have done it without you, Grandpa. You showed me that standing up for myself doesn't mean fighting back. It means staying strong and doing what's right." Chuck nodded approvingly. "Exactly. True strength isn't about overpowering others. It's about lifting them up, even when they don't deserve it." Emma glanced at the framed photo of him hanging on the wall, a reminder of his legendary status, and shook her head slightly. "Sometimes I forget how famous you are. To me, you're just my grandpa." Chuck chuckled softly. "And that's the way I like it. Fame doesn't define me. It's the values I live by that matter most. Remember that, kiddo. Be humble, be kind, and always stand your ground." As they talked, Emma reflected on everything that had happened. Her grandfather's arrival had changed not only her perspective, but also the dynamics of the entire town. Jake and his friends were no longer seen as troublemakers. They were becoming role models. Strangers greeted Emma with smiles, congratulating her for handling the situation with grace. Even her co-workers noticed the difference, praising her newfound confidence and leadership. Later that night, after Chuck retired to bed, Emma stayed up late thinking about the future. She imagined herself years from now, hopefully living out her dream of becoming a teacher. Perhaps she could use this experience to inspire her own students, to show them that kindness and courage go hand in hand. For the first time, she felt truly hopeful about what lay ahead. The next morning, Emma drove Chuck to the bus station. As they waited for his departure, she hugged him tightly, not wanting to let go. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "I'll miss you." "I'll miss you too, kiddo," Chuck replied, patting her back. "But remember, you don't need me to fight your battles. You've always had the strength within you. I just reminded you of that." Emma nodded, blinking back tears. When the bus arrived, she waved until it disappeared down the road, feeling both sad and grateful. Though her grandfather was gone, his presence lingered, a quiet reminder that sometimes heroes come in unexpected forms. Back at work later that day, Emma noticed something different about the restaurant. It wasn't just cleaner or busier, it felt lighter, as though the air itself carried a sense of renewal. Customers chatted happily, employees worked together seamlessly, and even Jake and his friends seemed genuinely content. Life in Willow Creek had returned to its usual rhythm, but things were different now. The bullies had changed, Emma had grown stronger, and the town had learned an important lesson about respect and kindness. And though no one ever mentioned Chuck Norris again, his influence remained, a legacy of compassion and integrity that would continue to shape the lives of those he touched. As Emma clocked out at the end of her shift, she paused to look around the restaurant one last time. For the first time in weeks, she felt truly at peace. The scars of the past hadn't vanished entirely, but they no longer defined her. With her grandfather's wisdom guiding her, she knew she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Smiling to herself, Emma stepped outside into the cool evening air. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift off her shoulders. Whatever tomorrow held, she was ready. Note: This part ties together the themes of personal growth, redemption, and community healing while maintaining simple language and third-person narration. As the days turned into weeks, life in Willow Creek continued to evolve. Emma noticed subtle changes everywhere she looked. At school, Jake, Kyle, and Ryan were no longer the loud, obnoxious trio who ruled the hallways with fear. Instead, they became quieter, kinder versions of themselves. They joined clubs they'd previously mocked, like the environmental group and the volunteer committee, and even started mentoring younger students who struggled with bullies of their own. At McDonald's, the transformation was equally remarkable. The restaurant had become a friendlier place, partly because Jake and his friends kept coming back, not to cause trouble but to help. They volunteered during busy shifts, cleaned tables without being asked, and made an effort to chat with employees like real people instead of targets for jokes. Customers began commenting on how much nicer the atmosphere felt, and Emma couldn't help but feel proud of the role she'd played in sparking this change. Her co-workers noticed her confidence too. Gone was the shy, hesitant girl who avoided eye contact and second-guessed herself. In her place stood someone stronger, surer, and more willing to speak up when something wasn't right. When a new employee joined the team, a nervous freshman named Lily, Emma took her under her wing, sharing tips and encouraging her to stand tall against any challenges that came her way. "I know it's scary sometimes," Emma told Lily one afternoon as they stocked condiment stations together. "But trust me, you're stronger than you think. Just remember to be kind, stay calm, and don't let anyone push you around." Lily smiled gratefully, nodding. "Thanks, Emma. You've been such a big help." It wasn't just at work or school where Emma saw growth. She felt it within herself, too. For so long, she doubted her ability to handle difficult situations, relying on avoidance rather than confrontation. But now, thanks to her grandfather's guidance, she understood that true strength came from standing firm, not through anger or aggression, but through patience, humility, and compassion. She realized that even though she didn't have her grandfather's fame or martial arts skills, she carried his values inside her, and that made all the difference. One evening, as Emma walked home from work, she passed by the park where Jake and his friends used to hang out. To her surprise, they weren't alone. Surrounding them were several younger kids listening intently as Jake explained the rules of a soccer game. It was clear he was coaching them, teaching them teamwork and fair play. Kyle and Ryan stood nearby, cheering enthusiastically whenever someone scored a goal. Emma stopped for a moment, watching silently from the edge of the field. She felt a swell of pride, not just for Jake and his friends, but for the entire community. Willow Creek had always been a tight-knit town, but now it felt closer, more united. People were treating each other better, looking out for one another, and making an effort to create a positive environment. And while Chuck Norris hadn't directly caused all these changes, his influence rippled outward like waves in a pond, touching everyone in its path. Later that night, as Emma sat in her room, writing in her journal, she thought about her grandfather. Though he was miles away, his words still echoed in her mind. True strength isn't about overpowering others, it's about lifting them up. She wrote those words down carefully, underlining them twice, knowing she'd carry them with her forever. The next morning, Emma received an unexpected letter in the mail. It was handwritten on plain stationery, the envelope bearing a Texas return address. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized her grandfather's neat handwriting. Eagerly, she tore open the envelope and began reading. "Dear Emma, I hope this letter finds her well. I've been thinking about you a lot since I left Willow Creek, and I wanted to check in. How are things going? Are Jake and his friends keeping their promise to do better? More importantly, how are you feeling? I know we didn't talk much about it before I left, but I want you to remember something. You don't need me or anyone else to fight your battles. You've always had the strength within you to face whatever comes your way. All I did was remind you of that. Now it's up to you to keep shining your light. Life won't always be easy. There will be tough days ahead, moments when you'll doubt yourself or feel overwhelmed. But I believe in you, kiddo, I always have. Keep standing tall, keep treating others with kindness, and never forget the lessons we talked about. You're going to do amazing things, I can feel it. Take care of yourself and give my love to your grandmother." Let me know how everything's going. Maybe I'll visit again soon. Love. Grandpa. By the time Emma finished reading, tears blurred her vision. She hugged the letter to her chest, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. Her grandfather might not live in Willow Creek anymore, but his presence remained, a steady source of encouragement and wisdom. Over the next few months, Emma threw herself into her studies, determined to make the most of her senior year. She earned top grades, participated in extracurricular activities, and saved enough money from her job to start applying for colleges. Her dream of becoming a teacher grew stronger with each passing day, fueled by the belief that she could inspire others the way her grandfather had inspired her. When graduation finally arrived, Emma stood on stage, diploma in hand, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. Her grandmother waved proudly from the front row, holding a bouquet of flowers. Beside her sat Chuck Norris, his cowboy hat tilted slightly forward as he grinned up at her. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she mouthed a silent thank you to him. After the ceremony, Emma hugged her grandfather tightly, unable to put into words how much his support meant to her. "I couldn't have done it without you," she whispered. "You did it all on your own, kiddo," Chuck replied, patting her back. "I'm just glad I got to be part of the journey." As they drove home together, Emma reflected on everything that had happened since that fateful day at McDonald's. The bullying, the broken phone, the humiliation, all of it had led her here to this moment of triumph. She realized now that every challenge she'd faced had shaped her into the person she was today, strong, resilient, and ready to take on the world. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Emma made a promise to herself. She would use her experiences to help others, just as her grandfather had helped her. Whether it was through teaching, volunteering, or simply offering a listening ear, she vowed to spread kindness wherever she went. Because ultimately that was what mattered most. Not fame or fortune, but the impact you had on the lives of others. And as she drifted off to sleep, one final thought crossed her mind. Sometimes, heroes come in unexpected forms, but their legacy lives on, not in statues or headlines, but in the hearts of those they touch.